I've got Helen Woods from CEO Confidential with me today, and we are talking about culture and what that means for your business. And we were just discussing offline, it sounds quite a harsh way of putting it, but most businesses are in business of making money, and the longevity of your staff and having a really relatively low staff turnover makes really good financial sense for your business. And we were talking about the fact that your company culture and your team culture can really play a major role in not only attracting the best staff into your organisation, but holding on to them as well. So thanks so much for chatting to me today, Helen.
Pleasure. Happy New Year to you, Joe.
You too, you too. So we were talking, you were going to give us sort of 3 hot tips around the concept of why culture is really important in your business, and some sort of ways to make sure that you're really having that front and centre with your planning and how things are actually actioned in your business.
Look, this is such a big topic and such an important topic. And you're right. You know, people often think that their culture is going well, but there are a whole lot of things that actually aren't going well. And, you know, having your data, knowing really the inside out approach, I suppose, to running a business is really important. So culture is the way we do things around here. Yeah. And of course, culture comes out of history. So when you think about our beginnings and the evolution of a company, it has a lot to do with how we have evolved over time. And sometimes some of those changes and those improvements get outdated. External factors change the way that we need to do things. So I think the thing that's really important here is that, and it's one of the principles we use around managing performance and leadership and strategy and bringing it all together, because that's really what culture is about. So it's all about belonging, the sense of belonging, and beginnings and endings. So in a sense, when people apply for a role, just let's take that for an example for a minute. When people apply for a role, they've got to have their mindset organised. And for those who are actually recruiting, you've got to have your antennae up so that you actually can pick up what really makes people tick here. And I think that it's not necessarily about taking the person on who's got the most knowledge or is the smartest person or the most experienced. Often it's about getting somebody who wants to live into a role. More often it's about somebody who's got the right attitude. So in a sense, new beginnings always end up with better endings. And I think in new beginnings, it's also about how we, create an opportunity, an opening for somebody, induct them well, and then work with them when they come into the organisation.
Yeah. So realistically, like the whole recruitment process, I was going to just say there that to me a real key for that is really expressing how we do things here in your job description. So from day one, people are going to say, okay, right, that sounds like maybe not for me. And that does a whole lot of culling for you right at the start. That's your shortlisting's done on your behalf for you there. But that onboarding process is just so imperative to the journey of it and the success, I suppose, isn't it?
Look, it is, and I think it's about the opportunity here. You're so right. It happens before the interview. It happens with the setup in how you write the brief. You know, any project is, and this is a project when you're recruiting somebody, is only as good as the brief. And I see more and more, I think these days, wonderful little exposés in a brief around the kinds of attitudes that we're looking for, the kind of environment that you're coming into, rather than the tasks and all the things that should be done and that we need to do and that are primary and that are secondary, and then a few other desired things. And it's often the desired things that we want that are the most important. And it's all about attitude. It's all about, creating an opportunity to sort of allow somebody to become a leader in your organisation. I mean, if you haven't got that kind of attitude when you're recruiting, what are you taking this person on for? It's all about bringing people in and having them stay.
Yeah. And do you think that that some people, like some job seekers, I know that we at Pointer, you quite often we talk to people that are sort of like, oh, do you know what? I'm not actually even worried about the pay so much, but I want something that I can enjoy going to work and being part of something more. Do you like come across with businesses that you work with sometimes that, especially when there may be new businesses or growing businesses or something, they might not have enormous budget for salaries to sort of headhunt people, but
Yeah.
if you can portray that culture piece well, that you still will get that talent in there?
Absolutely. Look, a lot of the work that I'm doing with a partnering organisation that it's called Leading Well.
Mm,
And leading well is about actually being well to lead well.
yeah,
So it's not just about the individual, but it's about the context, if you like, of the organisation as well.
mm,
So yeah, I think this is key. You know, the days of actually creating roles that are all about tasking and testing a person when they come into an organisation, I think are long gone. This is about how, you know, where it's not about us versus them. It's about the community that you come into. Mm-hmm. So it comes out of some really smart, you know, it reminds me of we're in tennis season, but the really smart operators
mm,
who are leaders who care for people, who are inclusive, who
mm.
create the opportunity for people to be their best self. And a lot of that is about how people are treated and how the expectations are negotiated right up front.
Yeah,
So we need to be much more open about how we engage with people, how we take them on and support them in that process.
yeah,
And I think the other thing too is very early on, it's not about managing and stewarding people through the processes of managing projects or just being in our organisation. It's actually about creating trust. It's actually about building confidence. It's about being fair. It's about having great communication, open-ended communication. So I think the creativity around this and the intention of being creative with this is really, really important. This is not about retentive kind of compliance and protecting and, you know, the arrogance that comes with being autocratic. It's really about being open-ended and welcoming.
yeah. And I love that, like, everything that you've just said then is for any organisation, whether you've got people in the office, whether people are working flexibly, whether they're working remotely. I think that that feeling of belonging, like we get sometimes a fair bit of pushback from businesses that are like, culture just doesn't work if they're not in the office, they're not around the water cooler, they're not going out for drinks afterwards. But I think that everything that you've just said then is completely, nothing there has been mentioned around beers or about the foosball table or anything that's actually office related. That's leadership stuff. That culture piece comes from the top and goes down from there.
Well, I think what you've really picked up here, Joe, is that culture for a lot of organisations is about habits.
Mm,
And it's
yeah.
great if people can be part of a community and have a beer on a Friday or, you know, get together socially and whatever. But you and I now realise you don't even have to be in the regions,
Yeah.
you know, the country regions like you guys are.
Yeah.
Just navigating your way to a workplace in the city can be quite difficult these days as well. So I think the sort of nature of work is changing quite dramatically. And
Well,
how
even on that, like that whole concept of after work beers, for if I was living in the city, that's not an option for me because I would be having to go and do daycare pickup and drive home to cook dinner, to do all of those things that sometimes what people refer to as company culture is actually quite exclusive to a specific part of your team that works for, which is actually excluding quite often half of your employees.
Absolutely, and that's where managing this tension and the polarities around, one piece with another is really important. I mean, part of, I guess, in a more mature and older style, big corporation, and it probably still happens, but not as much, I believe, with the people that I work with. But, the boss always was guaranteed a parking spot, and it was always the best spot in the building. Over the years, I think good leaders have realised that, it's about first in, best dressed. I mean, it's about when you've got a project that needs to be managed, it's about not only the sense of belonging to a project team, but the ordering of a project team. So it may be that, in fact, one of the junior people, but experienced in a particular area that is needed in this project, could be the best project leader.
Yeah.
But, it's an upside down, inside out world that I think is becoming much more of a sort of welcoming and opportunity to have a well-being approach to culture in our organisations.
Yeah, that's so interesting. Now, Helen, can you fill us in a little bit about how, if people wanted to follow along with what you're doing or to get in touch, give us a quick overview of CEO Confidential and who you work with and how people can get in touch with you?
Yeah. So CEO Confidential has really come out of a total professional career of doing the work that I love. So it started off as a team of strategists. We've worked for a long, long time with not-for-profit organisations. The Australian Ballet is one of my longest-serving clients, which is an absolute joy. I guess the focus started off looking at people's vision and strategy and whatever, and it evolved into then realising that we needed good governance, good leadership, good teamwork. And for a lot of the not-for-profit organisations that we've worked with, of course, that involves resourcing, bringing in money, a whole lot of things. So over the years, this thing has sort of rolled like, the wind rolls up the rubbish that's out in the bush in terms of creating something really big. And I guess over the years, I've done a lot of things around a lot of organisations in community enterprises, in the public sector and in the corporate sector. But these days, I tend to sort of do most of my work with people at the top. So it's really a process of working with people who can sponsor and influence good operation. Yeah. And, invariably the conversations that we have are with people who are worried about their businesses or worried about how their businesses are running. But in fact, if they can get their head straight, they can, just drop all the worry and become part of the opportunity to make it better, to be creative, to help people manage up. It's not always about managing down. So we work with CEOs, we work with people on boards, we work with folks who are running projects, we work with people who are partnering with other organisations, we work with folks in the country who are creating startups and the likes. And of course, we also work with people who are working in government, and probably some of that work is the most challenging because people are often very set, or systems are very often set in their ways. So I'm pretty active on LinkedIn. I have a website. I'm available to talk at any time. One of the things that I do is set aside about 5 or 6 hours a week to have conversations like you and I are having now, to have conversations with people I don't know. So, and I learned this from a fantastic experience I had a long, long time ago. If you're not having a coffee or a conversation with somebody you don't know yet, don't expect your life to change. Don't expect new things to pop up. So I'm a great believer in that, Jo, and I think that is, part of this sort of evolution of how we be in our organisations.
And you don't even have to be doing it in person like this today.
Exactly. It's a lot of fun.
Well, thank you so much for your time, Helen. I really appreciate it.
Thank you, Jo.